In this world, time is the only coin that matters. You hit 25, you stop aging, but you only get 1 year on your clock. After that, you're on borrowed time. Just don't let that digital zero hit your wrist, because once your time's up, it's game over. Down in the ghetto, folks are breaking their backs in factories just to scrape by with a few measly hours. Will was no different, just another soul caught in the rat race. He'd been pulling double shifts just to buy his mom a bottle of high-end bubbly for her 50th birthday. Now, even at 50, she still looked like she was in her prime, but their situation was anything but pretty. Will was down to his last 24 hours, and his mom, Rachel, only had 3 days left on her life bar. Rent, the power bill, and some old-school debts were about to eat her alive. If her clock hit 0, she was a goner. Before heading out, she reminds Will to catch her at the bus stop tomorrow evening. She taps him a quick 30 minutes so he can grab a bite during his shift. A little something to keep him running. In this world, time wasn't just ticking on your wrist. It was something you could lock away in a capsule. The rules in the ghetto were stone cold. Prices would skyrocket overnight. That coffee that cost you 3 minutes yesterday? It's 4 minutes today. The result? This inflation was dropping bodies left and right. To make matters worse, they slashed the payouts, and if you tried to catch an attitude or speak up, nobody was listening. Meanwhile, over at a dive bar in the ghetto, some rich dude was out here flexing, blowing his time like it was nothing and buying rounds for the whole house. Girls were swarming him like flies on honey, just trying to finesse some of that time off him. Will's boy, Betrayal, was living it up too, cause the man could drink anyone under the table. But the vibe shifted quick when a crew of thugs rolled up to jack the rich guy's time. They were led by Fortis, a man whose name alone kept the whole block shook. As soon as the crew rolled up, everyone cleared out, but Will stayed low, lurking in the shadows. The second he saw an opening, he snatched the rich dude and hauled tail out of there. Fortis's goons didn't stand a chance. They completely lost the trail. The rich guy's name was Henry. On the outside, he looked fine, but he was actually a 100-year-old geezer who had lost his spark. He was just done with life. He dropped a heavy truth bomb on Will. People aren't broke just because they're born that way. It's a rigged game. He explained that some big-shot businessman is pulling the strings, hiking up prices in the ghetto for no reason, just to keep folks under their thumb. It's a modern-day slave trap. People bust their tails for the elites, getting paid just enough time to survive until the next shift. It's a loop designed to keep them stuck, so they can never level up or escape the grind. The next morning, while Will was dead to the world, Henry pulled a fast one and ghosted his entire life savings of time over to him. By the time Will clocked what was happening, it was a wrap. The second Henry's clock hit 0. He flatlined right there. Now, Will was walking around with a massive target on his back. Sitting on that much time in this neighborhood was a death wish. He hit up Betrayal immediately, spilled the tea on everything, and handed him a 10-year stack to get him straight. His whole plan now was to bounce from the trenches and head to New Greenwich so he could give his moms the life she deserved. Meanwhile, that evening, Rachel squared away all her bills and cleared her debts. But when she tried to hop on the bus, the driver dropped a bombshell. The fare had doubled overnight. The ride required 2 hours, but she was rocking only 90 minutes on her clock. She begged the driver, telling him her son would cover the difference at the stop, but the dude wouldn't budge. He was cold-blooded. Rachel had no choice but to hoof it. Over at the stop, Will was sweating it out waiting for the bus, but when the doors opened, his mom's wasn't there. Sensing something was south, he took off sprinting. He saw her in the distance, running toward him with everything she had left. Rachel's clock was down to the wire, just a few heartbeats left. She lunged for him, but right as she reached out, her time hit 0. She collapsed into Will's arms and went cold right there. Will broke down, sobbing his heart out, and in that moment, he swore he'd dismantle this whole system that was sucking the life out of the poor. The next morning, the timekeepers found Henry's body. His wrist was showing a flat 0. Word on the street was Henry was holding a century before he rolled into this zone. In a place where people would catch a body for a week's worth of time, Henry dying broke looked like a straight-up hit. They started scrubbing the CCTV footage, and while they didn't catch the actual moment Henry checked out, they spotted Will on the bridge right where the body was dumped. Now timekeeper Leon has Will in his crosshairs. Meanwhile, that snake Fortis was on the prowl, hunting for whoever managed to swipe Henry's century. Will, on the other hand, had already dipped. He was headed straight for New Greenwich, the playground for the filthy rich. Crossing through all those time zones wasn't cheap though. He had to cough up a whole year of his life just to get past the gates. When he finally rolled in, a stunning girl couldn't take her eyes off him. Will played it cool, ignored the stares, and hit up the casino that evening. Just to get through the door, they taxed him another year. The place was packed wall to wall with high rollers. Will sat down at a poker table, and right in the middle of a hand, that same gorgeous girl from earlier showed up. Will pulled a total power move, going all in on a high-stakes play that cleaned out Mr. Philippe for 1100 years in a single heartbeat. Philippe's daughter, Sylvia, was absolutely floored by his guts. The two hit it off, and she invited him to her swanky bash the next day. Will dropped 59 years on a sleek luxury ride and showed up to the party looking like a total boss. At the party, Will was introduced to Philippe's mom and wife. Sylvia was clearly vibing with him, but she had a solid reason. She'd clocked his vibe and realized he was a ghetto kid fronting as a rich guy. Sylvia was fed up with her dad's suffocating rules and having bodyguards breathing down her neck 24/7. She was dying to live life on the edge. Just like the folks back in the ghetto, Will didn't miss a beat. He dodged the security detail and snuck her out to the ocean behind the estate. For a minute, they just let loose and tasted real freedom. They made it back before Philippe could smell a rat. But right then, the timekeepers swarmed the place and put Will in cuffs. They drained all his time into a capsule without a second thought. They didn't give a damn if Henry had gifted that time to Will or if he jacked it. Their only hustle was to get that time back into the system's pockets. Leon gave Will his word that after some grilling, they'd drop him back in the ghetto in one piece. But Will wasn't about to go out like a sucker. The moment he saw an opening, he went wild on them. He snatched Sylvia, using her as a human shield, and floored it out of there. But their getaway took a nasty turn. They got into a brutal wreck that knocked both of them cold instantly. Turns out, the whole thing was a setup, a trap laid by Fortis. The goons checked Will's clock, but since he only had a few measly minutes left, they passed on him and started jacking Sylvia's time instead. Just then, the timekeeper's ride pulled up on the bridge, forcing Fortis and his crew to bail. Will and Sylvia caught a lucky break and made it out alive, but they were in deep trouble. Sylvia's clock had been bled dry. She was rocking barely 30 minutes. At that rate, she was a walking corpse. Will scraped a little time from her and hauled ass toward Boral's place. Meanwhile, the timekeepers reached their wrecked car, but the birds had already flown the coop. Will and Sylvia finally made it to Boral's, hoping for a lifeline. See, Will had hooked Boral up with a 10-year stack just a few days ago, but it was all for nothing. Boral had drunk himself into an early grave, even though he still had 9 years ticking on his wrist. His wife wasn't trying to hear any excuses. She put the whole thing on Will. Time was running out fast. Sylvia was only 2.5 minutes away from flatlining. That's when Will used his head. He noticed Sylvia was wearing some high-end ice in her ears, and there was a pawn shop just a few blocks away. They booked it like their lives depended on it, and honestly, they did. They burst into the shop just in the nick of time. The greedy shop owner offered them a measly 48 hours for the earrings, even though the ice was easily worth a whole year. The dude totally ripped them off, but they didn't have a choice. At least now they had 24 hours each to breathe. This is where the real tea comes out, about why Will snatched Sylvia Weiss in the first place. Will had clocked her from the jump. He knew she was the daughter of the big boss at the Weiss Corporation. He'd kidnapped her on purpose to squeeze her old man for a ransom. Will demanded a 1,000-year payout in exchange for Sylvia's life. Not for himself, but to drop that time back to the people in the ghetto. He set the deadline for first thing in the morning, but Philippe wasn't having it. There was no way he was going to cough up 1,000 years just to let the poor folks have a taste. He knew that if the have-nots actually got their hands on that much time, they'd break free from his thumb. If they weren't desperate anymore, his whole twisted empire would come crashing down. The next morning, as soon as the time store opened its doors, Philippe's true colors came out. The dude didn't drop a single cent. He wouldn't even part with a plug nickel. It was clear he didn't give a damn about his own daughter's life. All he cared about was bleeding the poor dry. With the plan going south, Will cut Sylvia loose and told her she was free to go. Sylvia was just about to dial for help when Leon came out of nowhere, crashing the party. Sylvia didn't hesitate. She let it rip and winged him, leaving his shoulder a bloody mess. Instead of finishing him off or jacking his time, Will actually hooked him up with 2 hours. He knew timekeepers lived check to check, and since backup was hours away, Leon would have flatlined without it. Now, Will and Sylvia were in a tight spot. They only had 8 hours left on their clocks and were riding dirty in a stolen police cruiser. To stay ahead of the game, they pulled another move. They jacked a wealthy couple, swiping the ladies' ice and their ride. By now, the story was spreading like wildfire. The word on the street was that Will Salas, the prime suspect in Henry Hamilton's murder, was on the run with the heiress herself, Sylvia Weiss. When news of the ransom hit the wire, the big shots in the other time zones started tripping. They were shook that if that much time landed in the wrong hands, the whole market would go into a tailspin. Meanwhile, Philippe was out here doing damage control, swearing up and down to everyone that he hadn't paid out a single second. Right about then, Leon rolled up to see him. He'd already put out a warrant for Sylvia's arrest and came to lay it out for Philippe. If he even thought about helping his daughter hide out, he'd be cooked. Philippe was still in denial, though. He was convinced Sylvia was being brainwashed or forced into this mess. He just wanted his little girl back at any cost. He even tried to grease Leon's palm with a bribe, but Leon was a straight arrow. Before heading out, he looked Philippe dead in the eye and told him he couldn't be bought, not even with all the time in the world. On the other side of the tracks, Sylvia was actually starting to dig the outlaw life. She was finally feeling alive. She teamed up with Will and hit her own father's bank, sticking the place up. But they didn't stop at just jacking the vault. They wiped the slate clean for every poor soul there trying to get a loan. They made that time free for everyone. By the time Leon rolled up to the scene, they were already long gone. Will didn't forget his people, though. He left a time capsule for his boy's widow to get her back on her feet. He even tracked down that little orphan girl who used to beg him for a few spare minutes and hooked her up with a couple of years. They kept hitting the rich where it hurts, jacking time, and dropping it in the ghetto. But as soon as the regular folks got a little time in their pockets, things started going sideways. Instead of peace, it was total chaos. People started packing heat to protect their stash, and for sharks like Forties, the situation was a goldmine. It made jacking people even easier. Meanwhile, the news was blowing up with reports that Sylvia Weiss was straight up robbing her own old man. After their 6th heist, the law put a massive target on their backs and declared them both most wanted. Philippe had officially washed his hands of his daughter, but his wife was a total wreck. She wasn't ready to lose her baby girl for good. Back on the street, the timekeepers had finally managed to ping the stolen capsules and were closing in fast. Luckily, Will spotted them just in the nick of time, and the two of them hauled tail before the trap snapped shut. Leon was on their tail until the bitter end. Lead was flying both ways, but luckily, nobody caught a bullet. Eventually, Will and Sylvia caught a break. They bribed a bus driver and managed to slip through the cracks. For the first time, they were actually flush with time. They used their stash to book out an entire hotel just to lay low, but their luck ran out when a snitch in the lobby clocked them. That same snitch ended up walking straight into Fortis's grip. By now, there was a massive 10-year bounty on Will and Sylvia's heads, and Fortis was ready to do whatever it took to collect that bag. The customer played it smart and cut a deal to partner up with Fortis. They swarmed the hotel out of nowhere, catching Will totally off guard. But before putting a hit on him, Fortis wanted to gloat. He gave Will one shot to play for his life in a time fight. Will knew the score. Win or lose, he was a dead man walking. He played it cool, intentionally letting his clock drain until he was down to the wire. Then, with only seconds left, he flipped the script, took Fortis out, and saved both his and Sylvia's hides. But in the end, their little rebellion didn't mean squat. The Waste Corporation hit back hard, jacking up the prices of everyday essentials so high, it made everyone's heads spin. The regular folks ended up getting screwed even worse than before. To take down the Waste Corporation once and for all, they needed a serious payday. We're talking at least 1 million years. Sylvia cooked up a plan and headed straight to her old man, acting like she was ready to throw in the towel and surrender. Philippe had beefed up his security big time because he was shook, but Will was already one step ahead, hiding in plain sight among the guards. In the blink of an eye, Will pulled his piece and had Weiss at gunpoint. The guards had no choice but to stand down and take a knee. They marched Philippe at the end of a barrel to the high-security vault that held the motherlode, a single capsule packed with 1 million years, time that had been squeezed out of the poor through blood, sweat, and tears. Philippe tried to get in their heads, saying, "If you drop this time on the streets, the whole system collapses. For a few to be immortal, millions gotta kick the bucket." Hearing that made Will's blood boil. He remembered his mom's. She died because of those hiked-up prices, and Philippe had her blood on his hands. Sylvia was done with this toxic, suffocating life too. Even so, they decided to let Philippe live to see his empire crumble. The second those million years vanished from New Greenwich, the market started to tank, and the ripples were felt everywhere. Leon was on their tail like a bad habit, just like always. It didn't take long for him to get a lock on them. In all the chaos, Leon totally blanked and forgot to download his daily time quota. Now, New Greenwich had a strict no gunfire policy, but this time, the big shots threw the rulebook out the window and greenlit a shootout. Letting a million years leak out of New Greenwich was a straight-up code red for the system. They got lit up at the border, but somehow they dodged the lead and kept moving. As they hit the ghetto limits, Leon rammed their car, trying to run them off the road. Before Leon could even get his bearings, Will pulled a fast one. He tossed the million-year capsule to that orphan girl and told her to beat it. Leon pulled his piece on them, but a massive crowd started swarming the streets, giving Will and Sylvia just enough cover to vanish into the shadows. Leon wouldn't let up. He chased them all the way out to a deserted wasteland. Meanwhile, back in the ghetto, the orphan girl started making it rain, handing out time to everyone in sight. Will and Sylvia were finally cornered, but their clocks were ticking down to the final seconds. They were about to flatline. Will looked Leon in the eye and asked for that time back, the time he'd gifted him earlier. That's when it hit Leon like a ton of bricks. In his rush to play hero, he'd skipped his daily refill. Before he could even blink, his clock hit 0, and he dropped dead on the spot. Will and Sylvia were both staring death in the face. Their clocks were bleeding out, and there was only enough gas in the tank for one of them to make a break for it. But Sylvia wasn't about to bounce and leave Will behind. It was ride or die for both of them. Suddenly, Will had a light bulb moment. He hauled ass toward the timekeeper's squad car. He reached the cruiser just as his clock was about to flatline, snatched the timekeeper's daily quota, and did a 180, sprinting back toward Sylvia. She was down to her last 6 seconds. It was a total deja vu of how Will's moms went out. But this time, the script flipped. He reached her just in time, and she survived. They'd been vibing since the start, but this near-death experience made their bond rock solid. Meanwhile, Philippe was powerless to stop the bleeding. His factories started shutting down one by one, and his precious time zone system went into a total tailspin. People finally had enough time in their pockets to go wherever they damn well pleased. For everyone stuck in the ghetto, New Greenwich was always the dream. As they swarmed into zones 8 and 10, the whole social structure just crumbled. It was a massive movement, people marching together and sharing the wealth as they went. There wasn't even a law the government could use to stop them. As long as you could cough up the 1-month fee at the border, you were golden. And now, everyone was loaded. As for Will and Sylvia, they'd gone completely off the grid. The feds put a fat century-long bounty on their heads to bring them in, but they weren't sweating it. On the other side of town, they were already pulling up to another major bank, ready to pull off their biggest heist yet.